think, Marge. All I need is a title.
Welcome to the show. Over the next half hour or so, we are going to go in depth on how exactly the Obama administration, almost literally since its earliest days in 2009, routinely, improperly, and very likely illegally used its spy powers for political gain, targeting everyone from journalists who dared to write critical stories to members of the Senate Intelligence Committee and, yes, members of Donald Trump's presidential campaign and transition team. A new report out today from Fox News' Catherine Herridge indicates Samantha Power, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, was unmasking, that is, revealing the identities of American citizens caught up in foreign surveillance at such a rapid pace in the final months of the Obama administration that she averaged more than one request for every working day in 2016, and even sought information in the days leading up to President Trump's inauguration, multiple sources close to the matter told Fox News. Two sources who were not authorized to speak on the record said the requests to identify Americans whose names surfaced in foreign intelligence reporting, known as unmasking, exceeded 260 last year. One source indicated this occurred in the final days of the Obama White House. The detail emerged ahead of an expected appearance by Power next month on Capitol Hill. Also out today, Cheryl Atkinson, the former CBS reporter who claimed repeatedly that her computer was hijacked, possibly by the Obama administration, as she was writing deeply critical stories about Operation Fast and Furious, the gun-walking operation headed by Obama Attorney General Eric Holder, has an article today in The Hill that basically puts into context what we have learned about the Obama administration's apparent snooping on the Trump campaign last year. In 2016, she notes, Obama administration officials searched through intelligence on U.S. citizens a record 30,000 times. To put that into perspective, in 2013, a non-election year, Obama administration's officials searched American citizens just 9,500 times. From January 2016 until after the election, though, that number increased 3 times. What possible reason could there be for that massive of an increase, if not because it was an election year? And now we know through a report on CNN that there was, in fact, a secret FISA court warrant issued that allowed for the wiretapping of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Even when President Trump on March 4th tweeted that Obama, quote, tapped my wires at Trump Tower, there was widespread scorn and mockery that in no way could the Obama administration be capable of such a thing. Heck, it's the Justice Department. It's not the White House that does that sort of thing. The media, of course, ignoring the possibility that then Attorney General Loretta Lynch was acting on direct orders of President Obama or his right-hand woman, Susan Rice. What we now know, though, is that this fits perfectly into a pattern of what the Obama administration had been doing for all 8 of its years. When it determined that someone or some entity was a threat, was investigating, or was writing stories critical of the Obama administration, the administration would routinely respond by sicking the NSA, the FBI, or the CIA on said target. Atkinson, in her piece in The Hill this morning, notes that a September 21st, 2010 email from the global intelligence firm Stratfor says, quote, John Brennan, who at the time was Homeland Security Advisor for President Obama, he later became director of the CIA. Brennan is behind the witch hunts of investigative journalists learning information from inside the Beltway sources. Note, there is a specific tasker from the White House to go after anyone printing materials negative to the Obama agenda. Parentheses, oh my. Even the FBI is shocked. The Wonder Boys must be in meltdown mode, ... That was released as part of an email dump WikiLeaks put out a couple of years ago. It was from September 10th. It indicated that over the past year at least, the Obama administration had been routinely spying on reporters. This was around the time, by the way, that Operation Fast and Furious was getting going, and it would seem that the big political agenda of the day, passing Obamacare, might have been prompting Obama administration officials to use the intelligence apparatus to go after writers who dared to oppose Obamacare. And it didn't stop with reporters. In 2011, the Obama administration's Justice Department wiretapped Ohio Congressman Dennis Kucinich. He's a Democrat, and he talked about what happened on Fox News earlier this year.
You say something similar happened to you back in 2011. You say this, I can vouch for the fact that extracurricular surveillance does occur regardless of whether it is officially approved. I was wiretapped in 2011 after taking a phone call in my congressional office from a foreign leader. Why did you feel the need to speak out now?
Well, it's important because there are people who are saying about President Trump's claim, oh, it could never happen. Well, frankly, it happened to me. And I had proof because the Washington Times actually let me listen into a tape that was made of a conversation in my congressional office. It was a conversation between myself and a foreign leader. The conversation was approved and cleared by House attorneys who said, yes, you can do that. That's your constitutional right. But someone had intercepted it. And I learned about it 2 years after I left office. Members of Congress ought to be aware that my experience was that my phone wasn't safe in a congressional office. Now, if they can do that to a member of Congress, they can certainly do it to a presidential candidate, and they can do it to private citizens as well.
And as we learn, they will. In 2013, though, the big controversy was again over spying on reporters. Attorney General Eric Holder's Justice Department subpoenaed phone records from the Associated Press, 20 of them, in fact, during a 2-month period in 2012. Now, what was going on in 2012 that the Associated Press might want to be snooped on? It was, of course, an election. The Justice Department would not say, and this is critical, why it sought those records. The Associated Press's CEO, Gary Pruitt, said this was a massive and unprecedented intrusion into news gathering. These records potentially reveal communications with confidential sources across all of the news gathering activities undertaken by the AP during a 2-month period, provide a roadmap to AP's news gathering operations, and disclose information about AP's activities and operations that the government has no conceivable right to know. Critically, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, lied under oath at least twice when the House Intelligence Committee asked him about this. He said that he had no knowledge of this because he had recused himself from this matter. He didn't know about these subpoenas because he had an underling make those subpoenas.
I was recused in that matter, as I described, I guess, in a press conference that I held yesterday. The decision to issue this subpoena was made by the people who are presently involved in the case. The matter is being supervised by the Deputy Attorney General. I am not familiar with the reasons why the subpoena was constructed in the way that it was, because I'm simply not a part of the case.
A couple of days later, the Washington Post reported that Holder's Justice Department had monitored a Fox News reporter. It tracked his visits to the State Department through phone pings. It basically picked up Rosen's cell phone's pings and tried to time when he was using his phone to either email or to make phone calls to try to determine when he was visiting the State Department, try to pinpoint who it was he was talking to. Holder denied that he signed off on this subpoena.
I recused myself because I thought it would be inappropriate and have a bad appearance to be a person who was a fact witness in the case to actually lead the investigation, given the fact, unlike Mr. Cole, that I have a greater interaction with members of the press than he does.
James Cole was his underling who Holder said signed off on the subpoena. May 23rd, that was proven to be a lie and very likely perjury. May 23rd, NBC News was able to confirm Holder personally signed off on the Rosen case. The Defense Department was forced to admit that it was Eric Holder who personally signed off on this. Quote, after extensive deliberations and after following all applicable laws, regulations, and policies, the department sought an appropriately tailored search warrant under the Privacy Protection Act. Later that year, in fact, about a month later, it was determined that the Obama administration's NSA was actually using bulk metadata to essentially spy on all of us. Millions of Americans had their bulk metadata, who they were calling, what numbers that were appearing on cell phone logs, that sort of thing. It was thought to be the stuff of science fiction, of only the most paranoid of minds, but it was confirmed. And it was confirmed shortly after the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, who appears to be at the center of all of this, denied it when asked specifically by a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Ron Wyden.
So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
They, of course, did wittingly. And in fact, that prompted a rewriting of the USA Patriot Act to prevent this sort of activity. It was a lie. And as we shall see, James Clapper has routinely lied about what the administration was doing with respect to spying for apparently political purposes. The very next year, a McClatchy News story, July 31st, 2014, an internal CIA investigation confirmed allegations that agency personnel improperly intruded into a protected database used by Senate Intelligence Committee staff to compile a scathing report on the agency's detention and interrogation program, prompting bipartisan outrage and at least 2 calls for Spy Chief John Brennan to resign. Remember, John Brennan, back in 2010, was named in this Stratfor email as being behind the, quote, witch hunts of investigative journalists learning information from inside the Beltway sources. He was the one, according to this email, who charged a, quote, specific tasker from the White House to go after anyone printing materials negative to the Obama agenda. So the Senate Intelligence Committee starts digging around, writes a scathing report about what the CIA was doing. The CIA responds by essentially hacking into this database that Senate Intelligence Committee staff members and members of the committee itself, senators, were using. Once again, a pattern developing. Anyone who is perceived to be a threat to the Obama administration is targeted. That effort apparently ramped up in 2016 when, after an investigation into Paul Manafort yielded nothing, and a previous FISA court surveillance order had to expire because of a lack of evidence, in June or July, a wiretapping order, June or July of 2016, when, remember, Manafort had been named the campaign chair of the Donald Trump campaign, all of a sudden, a FISA court order was sought by the Obama Justice Department and issued. Manafort was named campaign chairman in April, I believe early April, and served until August. So he had just a couple of months, but it seems as though the timing is very suspicious. There was no evidence whatsoever to continue with an investigation into Manafort until such a time as he is leading the opposition party's presidential campaign. President Trump, at some point in early 2017, became aware of this. On March 4th, he issued his now infamous tweet, "Obama tapped my wires," tapped the wires at Trump Tower. Paul Manafort was living at Trump Tower. That tweet, though it was widely mocked and widely presumed to be a lie, was in fact true. If Manafort was communicating with Donald Trump, that very likely would have been picked up on surveillance. And remember, in that year, in 2016, Obama administration officials searched through intelligence of U.S. citizens a record 30,000 times. Just 3 years earlier, it was 9,500 times. March 5th, the day after President Trump issues that tweet, James Clapper, the DNI, Director of National Intelligence under Obama, goes on Meet the Press.
Let me start with the president's tweets yesterday. This idea that maybe President Obama ordered an illegal wiretap of his offices. If something like that happened, would this be something you would be aware of?
I would certainly hope so. I can say, obviously I can't speak officially anymore, but I will say that for the part of the national security apparatus that I oversaw as DNI, there was no such wiretap activity mounted against the president-elect at the time, or as a candidate, or against his campaign. I can't speak for other Title III authorized entities in the government or a state or local entity.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if the FBI, for instance, had a FISA court order of some sort for a surveillance, would that be information you would know or not know?
Yes.
You would be told this?
I would know that.
If there was a FISA court order
Yes.
on something like this?
Something like this, absolutely.
And at this point, you can't confirm or deny whether that exists?
I can deny it.
There is no FISA court order?
Not to my knowledge.
Of anything at Trump Tower?
No.
This, of course, was a lie. According to CNN's report, there was a FISA court order at Trump Tower of Paul Manafort. You notice, though, how specific and how flat a denial that James Clapper made. No, there was no wiretap. No, there was nothing of that sort. And yes, if there was, I would have known about it. Certainly, something that politically explosive, that there was active monitoring of a presidential candidate's campaign manager, obviously would have gone to the highest levels of government. It would have gone to the highest levels of the Justice Department, and it would have gone to the Director of National Intelligence. It also would have gone to the FBI. Then Director James Comey, though, testified on March 22nd before the Senate Intelligence Committee that there was no such wiretapping at all.
Director Comey, was the president's statement that Obama had his wires tapped in Trump Tower a true statement?
With respect to the president's tweets about alleged wiretapping directed at him by the prior administration, I have no information that supports those tweets, and we have looked carefully inside the FBI. The Department of Justice has asked me to share with you that the answer is the same for the Department of Justice and all its components. The department has no information that supports those tweets.
Okay. At around the same time, the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes was widely criticized when he suggested that the Obama administration was improperly unmasking names as a result of this secret FISA court order. It was seen at the time, back in March, as a ham-handed attempt to defend President Trump's controversial tweet. Susan Rice, who is the former national security advisor, the very next day after James Comey testified, appeared on PBS with Betsy Woodruff and flatly denied that she did any sort of unmasking.
I know nothing about this. I was surprised to see reports from Chairman Nunes on that count today. I mean, let's back up and recall where we have been. The President of the United States accused his predecessor, President Obama, of wiretapping Trump Tower during the campaign. Nothing of the sort occurred, and we've heard that confirmed by the director of the FBI, who also pointed out that no president, no White House can order the surveillance of another American citizen. That can only come from the Justice Department with the approval of a FISA court. Okay. Notice the specific denial. No one from the Justice Department unmasked. No one. I don't know anything about unmasking. About a month later, though, on CNN's Fareed Zakaria program, she appeared to soften her tone.
What is your reaction to that? It's an extraordinary charge by the President of the United States.
Well, Fareed, it's absolutely false. I've addressed this previously. I think now we've had subsequently members of Congress on the intelligence committees on both sides of the aisle take a look at the information that apparently was the basis for Chairman Nunes's concern and say publicly that they didn't see anything that was unusual or untoward.
There was nothing that was unusual or untoward. She goes on later in that interview to say, I was just doing my job. I was acting in the interests of national security. Could that be that she softened her tone because 3 days ago, CNN reported that she privately told House investigators that she did unmask the identities of senior Trump officials. She claimed to understand why the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates was in New York late last year. This, according to multiple sources. The New York meeting preceded a separate effort by the UAE to facilitate a back-channel communication between Russia and the incoming White House. This, according to these sources. This means that Michael Flynn, who we already know was unmasked, was, along with Jared Kushner and top strategist Steve Bannon, unmasked as part of this investigation. But why? This is the operative question. Was this a legitimate investigation, or once again, was there unmasking of people close to the incoming president, people close to then candidate Trump, being unmasked to try to get some understanding of what was going on? Now, on May 8th, despite the repeated denials, remember, on Meet the Press, James Clapper said, no, there's nothing to this tapping of wires or anything like that. But on May 8th, before the Senate Intelligence Committee, both Clapper and former acting Attorney General Sally Yates, remember the woman who very famously refused to enforce President Trump's executive action on immigration, was subsequently fired for it and seen as a sort of liberal martyr. Both of them, under oath, were forced to admit, yes, they were examining unmasked communications.
Mr. Clapper and Ms. Yates, did either of you ever request the unmasking of Mr. Trump, his associates, or any member of Congress?
Yes, in one case I did. I can specifically recall, but I can't discuss it any further than that.
You can't. So if I ask you for details, you said you can't discuss that? Is that what you said?
Not here.
Okay. Ms. Yates, can you answer that question? Did you ever request unmasking of Mr. Trump, his associates, or any member of Congress?
No.
Question 2, did either of you ever review classified documents in which Mr. Trump, his associates, or members of Congress had been unmasked?
Oh, yes.
You have. Can you give us details here in this?
No, I can't.
Ms. Yates, have you?
Yes, I have, and no, I can't give you details.
So, yes, both of them admit to having discussed classified communication with unmasked names of members of the Trump administration, but no, they refused to say anything about it. Yet last night on CNN's Don Lemon program, James Clapper stood by what he said on Meet the Press, that he had no idea about any wiretaps or anything that would lead to the unmasking of Trump officials in the first place.
Well, I stand on that statement that you just replayed, and I cannot comment on the media reporting, which is all we have, about a FISA warrant allegedly lodged against Mr. Manafort. I can't comment on that. I will simply reiterate what I said in March, and I stand on that.
Yeah, and that there is, as far as Trump Tower being wiretapped, according to the president, you say what?
I stand on what I said on the 5th of March on Meet the Press, as you just replayed it.
Okay. So did you know, and I hate to keep, I just want to, just for clarity, because there's been a lot of reporting on this, right? And people on you know, especially those supporters of the president saying, oh, here's proof, here's proof. So did you know about a FISA warrant against Paul Manafort at the time?
I did not.
You did not.
You know, FISAs are classified. And so, you know, even if I knew something about it, I couldn't, and I don't. And I will just conclude by saying I stand on what I said on the 5th of March.
Is it possible the president was picked up in a conversation with Paul Manafort?
It's certainly conceivable. Yeah,
Is it likely?
I can't say. I wouldn't want to go there, but I will say it's possible.
It's possible. How likely is it? Well, given what we know about what the Obama administration was doing, given the dramatic increase in the number of people it was investigating, coincidentally starting with the beginning of an election year, January 2016, given the fact that it increased by a factor of 3, the number of U.S. citizens, or the number of times it reviewed intelligence about U.S. citizens in that election year. Given that we know that the ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, whose job does not include in any way whatsoever unmasking American citizens, did so at an average of more than 1 a day towards the end of the Obama administration, towards the latter half of 2016. At the same time, the election was ramping up. At the same time, remember, this was after the nominating conventions. This was the waning days of the Republican, or rather of the general election, when the Republican candidate was clearly Donald Trump. What was also happening at the exact same time that all of this intelligence gathering on Trump administration officials was going on, there was this narrative forming through the formation of the, quote, Trump dossier, which has been discredited, that Donald Trump and his campaign was colluding with Russia. Even though in the more than 1 year now of investigation into this claim, there has been no evidence made public. There has been nothing to suggest there was any collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. So much so that, in fact, the special counsel, Robert Mueller, has now shifted the focus of his investigation away from Russian collusion and into financial crimes allegedly committed by Paul Manafort and possibly Michael Flynn as well. What are we to conclude about what was going on here? Well, knowing what we know, knowing what I have just outlined about the entirety of the Obama administration weaponizing not just intelligence gathering, but the IRS too, to target political opponents or journalists or anyone, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Congress people like Dennis Kucinich, anyone who the Obama administration perceived to be a threat. Is there any doubt that what it perceived to be as its greatest threat, the greatest threat to the Obama legacy, a Donald Trump presidency, could be targeted as well? It is starting to get to the point, given the totality of the circumstances and all of the evidence that I just laid out, that there was, in fact, surveillance done for political purposes, to gain an edge in a political campaign, and after said campaign was over, to embarrass the incoming president or to harm the new presidential administration through selective leaks that made that administration look bad.
Made clear to our viewers and listeners is that, look, this is the inauguration represented the beginning of his second term.
Yes.
But it also represented the countdown of the end of his presidency.
That's right.
And the reality is, like anything else, you better get what you can while he's there, because look, come 2016, that's it.
Well, you know, I don't know, and I think some people are missing something here. The president has put in place an organization that contains the kind of database that no one has ever seen before in life. That's going to be very, very powerful, and whoever...
In terms of the Organizing for America that he's now shifting to become a 501c4.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. And that database will have information about everything on every individual in ways that it's never been done before, and whoever runs for president on the Democratic ticket have to deal with that. They're going to have to go down with that database and the concerns of those people because they can't get around it. And he's been very smart. I mean, it's very powerful what he's leaving in place. And I think that's what any Democratic candidate is going to have to deal with.